Pulis, Philippines. Is Manila the undisputed hub for iGaming in Asia? This is what we will find out in the next panel. And here with us we have McDonnell, Alan Yan, and Saxon Shadforth. We start with you, Keith. What makes you qualified for this panel? Tell us a bit more about your experience.
Sure, Eman. Firstly, thanks for inviting me on this panel. I always enjoy talking about iGaming in Asia. I've been in the gambling industry for 20 years, and probably for 12 of those, I've been involved in the Asian side of things. Initially employed for a global operator, and that got me going to the Philippines initially. I was based there in 2009. And when I set up KMiGaming.com, I kind of stood on a bridge between Asia and Europe. I helped Western operators to move to Asia and move to Manila in the Philippines, but also some Asian operators to do sponsorship deals in Europe.
And you've lived in
and a lot of the assistance was really educating European operators about the Asian market, and specifically about Manila and the Philippines as a hub for iGaming, which is the topic of this panel. You know, a lot of them have a real, admittedly by them, a real lack of understanding of why Manila is the hub it is. But you know, what it comes down to is Manila really is the only jurisdiction in the whole of Asia that offers a license to iGaming operators. Now, it doesn't offer a license for them to market their internet service to Filipinos, but it does allow them to set up operations in Manila and other parts of the Philippines and target other parts of Asia. So they can set up operations there now under a PAGCOR license and target, you know, the rest of Asia. Labor is very well educated now, you know, because of the history of that. The region is used to these sorts of businesses setting up there, so the infrastructure is in place, telecommunications, you know, licensing, talent, as I said. So all in all, you know, it's got a lot going for it. And you know, I would actually argue that the Philippines, I don't know any bigger global hub for iGaming. I don't know anywhere bigger in the world for iGaming than Manila right now.
Alan, mic to you. Well, the title takes it for granted that the Philippines is the undisputed hub. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. Just to take an example, from New York to Las Vegas, 5 hours of flight radius. If centered in Macau, it covers over 60% of the world population. So where Asia has the world's largest gambling population. So that's no other continent can compete. Where, like Keith said, Philippines is the only legal jurisdiction for online games. So with the with large gambling population, like for example Macau, the gaming revenue in Macau, it's like 7 times bigger than Las Vegas. So where the large gambling population spilled over to the online gambling just for, you know, to get access to the gambling table. So that's the situation.
Yeah.
So and where the government, the Chinese government limit in the recent years the Chinese gamblers from China to visit Macau. So these people, you know, basically play from home through the internet.
Okay, you're talking a lot about Macau, which is naturally predominantly land-based. And yeah, I would dare say there is an animosity towards online gaming
because,
from that region.
Basically it's a gambling. So Macau is educated the whole Asia for the gambling, the games. So where it is always limited to visit Macau. So where you're at home for, like, for example, the live dealer games. It's exactly try to produce or reproduce the gaming environment like the land-based. So same thing. You play online. you see the same dealer, you say same style of the game. So that is basically because of Macau, because of so many gamblers. So online gaming, it's very popular in this region.
Understood. I'll move over to you, Saxon. And the Philippines, an undisputed hub. Funnily enough, a lot of people believe that regulation started in Europe. I mean, Malta regulated the space back in 2004. However, very few people probably know that under a different organization, back then it was CESA, not PACOR, within the Philippines. Back in the 90s, 1997 if I'm not mistaken, they were already discussing regulating online gambling as we know it today. But Saxon, tell us a bit more about your experience with the licensing regime in the Philippines.
Well, certainly, I mean, you talk about the Philippines being the hub. It wasn't always that way. The industry's obviously been centered in Asia for a long time, and it started in other countries that had a more forward-leaning approach, or I wouldn't say regulated, but it was certainly a safe and structured place to operate. So Malaysia and Taiwan was really where the industry and large teams of bookmakers and traders started in the late 90s.
Late 90s, okay.
Yeah, and I think really what's changed over that 13, 14-year period has been obviously thousands and thousands of people have moved to the Philippines, many locals, but obviously a lot of expats have gone there and employed a lot of people, and along with the BPOs that moved to the Philippines in that same time, whether it be financial services, banking, telecommunications, airlines, the whole economy, I think the tide rose with all of that infrastructure that was put in place. So when I first went there in 2007, fundamental things like IT infrastructure, security and information security, and just the infrastructure just was not there to support some of the high demands of
the bigger operators, yeah.
The iGaming space.
Yeah.
So it's been there for a long time, but I think things have changed significantly in the last decade at least. Yeah. And it's a relative to other parts of the region, I think it's now on a somewhat equal footing in terms of talent, infrastructure, cost, and it wobbled a little bit with its regulatory framework. So that's been the biggest change in recent years.
And so there's a lot of operators and suppliers looking from outside Asia, wondering where they should be setting up offices or going for licensing. And the title claims the Philippines is an undisputed hub. So my next question is the following. What is the political climate like between government and opposition, for example? Is there a consensus where all parties are towing the same line in favor of gaming? Or would companies worry that with any change in government, there's going to be rocking of boats? I mean, what's the situation compared to regions such as Europe, for example? Keith.
Yeah, I mean, compared to Europe, it's I would say it's far more volatile, but it always has been. I say that with a slight caveat that, you know, nothing is easy anywhere right now. Compliance is getting harder. You know, we look at the UK, and even as we come through the COVID crisis, the UK GC has not backed down in enforcing fines. Yeah. But through my experience with Manila, you know, it's always been the way of business, you know, and prior to PAGCOR issuing the POGO licenses, we had First Cagayan as the main license issuer.
That is, for the audience, Keith, for the audience that is tuning in, it's pertinent to explain maybe the Cagayan region is synonymous with the CESA licensing that started back, correct me if I'm wrong, in the 90s?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
Correct. And it was only, Saxon may correct me here, maybe 2 or 3 years ago that PAGCOR took over the thing of iGaming licenses, which are called POGO licenses. but there's always been that volatility and that way of doing business down there, where just because you have a license doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be issued a free pass to go about your business with no interruptions whatsoever. I think the other thing, just to cover off, Eman, on this point, there's two very different types of companies within the iGaming business that operate under this jurisdiction. The example I'll give you is I helped one Western operator to go and take a look at the region at Manila, and their mindset at the time was about launching a brand into Southeast Asia. They're an established brand in Europe. I won't mention their name, but they were thinking about promoting their brand in Southeast Asia and basing operations in Manila. They decided ultimately that was a step too far for them. They'd have to get payment solutions in place, all the stuff Alan knows a lot about. But what they did do was they built their call center down there. So they cut the costs of supporting their call center for the European business by basing 150 people in a call center in Manila, which is what Saxon was saying about building on the infrastructure that was built for other industries, and having a good customer support center there. So I think some companies look at it, yes, as a platform to market their brand into Asia and have an Asian branding strategy, but others look at it as a way of bringing operational efficiencies to a business they have elsewhere around the world.
And probably there's no better place to outsource such workforce like call centers than the Philippines. I mean, if you want an international call center that has a proper accent, probably there's no better place than the Philippines to have such workforce, just because their English is flawless, if I may.
Yeah, it's and also just their knowledge of various sectors now is built up over years. So it's the training requirements are there, but they're maybe not as onerous as they were 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Ellen.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot of POGO licenses out there acquired by companies who had an interest in China. Now, China's the big elephant in the room, and is it too risky for PACCOR to be dependent on mostly Chinese-facing operators? What is the situation?
Yes, the major difference that you get a license in out of Philippines versus the European license, since the market that all the operators that are targeting in most of the Asia, including China, is gray. So it's not, well, in other words, it's not legal. So and so the Philippines created this business model so that the operators could run their website out of, or BPO out of the Philippines legally, and working on the markets, which is great. So yes, in China, the current government is very strong, and they try to control everything. So of course they increase the pressure over not just the Philippines, all over Asia.
All over. I mean, we've seen it in the past when the Chinese government flexed its muscles. You had a stampede of operators flocking out of Cambodia because the Cambodian government obliged and shut down licenses in Cambodia, or shut down operations in Cambodia. However, the Filipino government stuck by the operators and said, this is a matter of national jurisdiction, and iGaming is here to stay. So recently the Filipino government said, no, gaming is here to stay, but is it risky moving forward? Could anything happen that would rock the boat and see a similar scenario like the Cambodian?
Yeah, I think in the Philippines, it's strategically located that they have a lot of influence from the U.S. So U.S. equally as strong as China. So basically, they're pulling the Philippines. So being online gambling provides a huge revenue to the government, so they cannot just simply give up.
Understood.
And
So unlike Cambodia, who are very close to China,
but
the Philippines has strong ties on both sides, so they could withhold their ground.
right, and also Cambodia is bordering China, and some of the power supply, internet, and telecom infrastructure are building or are provided by Chinese, where Philippines is a more sovereign state that is very independent.
Yeah.
It is not very far from China, but it is far enough that that is and more independent than Cambodia and those regions.
Saxon, back to you. How important do you feel it is for POGO licenses to rely on other jurisdictions, in the sense to have more international players relocate to Manila or to the Philippines and acquire POGO licenses that are not necessarily facing China?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that there are many sectors and ancillary services that are, I guess, in and around iGaming. So, whether you're a game provider or a fintech company that's offering payment solutions to many sectors, including gaming, or whether it's one of the other factors which I don't think there's anywhere else I've worked or lived in the world that is such a 24/7 center. So to get people in the UK to work past 5 o'clock is tough. In the Philippines, there's a huge population that actually revels the opportunity to go to work at 10 p.m. and experience only modestly horrific traffic. So there is, I guess, a lot of other selling points about all sorts of, whether it's trading, managed trading services. I think you should, the operators certainly might provide 150,000 jobs, but in and around that, whether it's data centers, other types of services, you can't underestimate just how big all the other services are, and that's probably why it's such an important thing for the Philippine government to keep supporting the industry or not alienate it.
Yeah, you could say it's deeply entrenched within the economy now, and you can't just switch off the lights.
No, I think like many developing countries or even developed countries, taxation is a complex issue, and in many cases it's the collection and the way it's I guess collected and how it's dispersed is really the fundamental probably challenge. The Philippine government is probably very motivated to ensure that they collect as much revenue as possible and employ as many of their people and have them working in industries that are, I guess elevating their education levels or their experience levels so they can continue to be more relevant on the Southeast Asian stage and in particular providing services globally.
Yeah. Well, certainly great potential in Asia. We're talking about 4.5 billion people. So definitely a market one should never neglect, I believe. And we've seen operators who have been accustomed to the European way because they had business in Europe and had also successful mergers or acquisitions. One person that comes to mind, he's also a speaker for SiGMA Asia, is Robin Reed. Successfully built GIG, Gaming Innovation Group, and now is launching his new startup, a very exciting product facing Asia called Ichiban. So you're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs moving away from Europe because of all the AML, all the KYC that is perhaps stifling growth, and huge opportunities in Asia await. How do you see this stampede probably of entrepreneurs moving into Asia? Do you see any of that happening, Keith?
I mean, I've seen it happening for as long as I've been involved in Asia. I mean, we go back, Bet365 have been involved in Asia for a long time. Lots of brands have. I think the common denominator for me, though, in terms of the success versus the failures, is that however successful those brands were in Europe or whatever market they've come from, they've taken time and effort to partner with people who know the local issues. I've seen brands go down there who've said, let me translate my website into Mandarin or Cantonese and, put 88 on the end of my brand and it'll work. And they've, within 6 months, left the region with their tails tucked between their legs. I think those who take time to meet people, and when I say time, I mean years, to build relationships with people who have got contacts in the payment space, in the marketing space, software. So not just taking a sportsbook software supplier that did very well for the UK, but actually understanding the options in Asia. They're the ones who have the longevity in the region and actually who end up doing well. And I got lots of examples of brands on both sides of that coin. Yeah. So just because, that they're a successful entrepreneur in one place doesn't mean they're going to work in another. With that said, Eman, and you know this yourself, part of the reason they're successful in the first place is they know this, so they know to establish local relationships. You've done it with SiGMA, and taking it to Asia, which will help you build SiGMA as a brand in Asia. And the brands that will work in Asia will do the same on the gambling side.
Couldn't agree more with that observation, Keith. If you want to build a successful business, you need to live there. You need to pack and go live in the region where the operators are based, where the suppliers are based, and you need to really understand the fiber of how online gaming works by spending time there. I mean, we've done it ourselves, packed with family and moved to Manila. And looking back, there's no other way you can build a show in Asia other than truly understanding the region. But before we wrap this up, we're talking about the Philippines being the undisputed heavyweight. However, as a heavyweight, you always need to look back on your shoulders and make sure you know where the other hot regions in Asia are. So if we had to pick other regions, what would you make of regions like Taiwan, like Cambodia, or any other places that you feel have a good potential of becoming other hubs? Saxon.
I would think Taiwan is...
Yeah, Saxon or Aaron, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah. I would think that Taiwan is it's a very good place, even though there's no legislation yet for online gambling. But Taiwan basically copied the business model, the BPA business model, from the Philippines. So where the gambling is not local, so you don't take the local bet, where it's offshore gambling website. So the BPO basically serve the offshore gambling website. Yeah. So it is. There are many operators moving to Taiwan. One, the employees have much better education, and they'll be able to serve the largest market like China, and they speak Chinese. And also politically, Taiwan is more Western than Chinese. So understood. And like for example, the Chinese police cannot cross the strait to go to Taiwan. So that is one protection for the operators, in compared with the other regions like Cambodia, Vietnam, or even the Philippines.
Saxon. So. Thank you, Alan. Saxon, any other jurisdiction that tickles your fancy?
Well, having worked in the region and specifically on projects to try to diversify reliance on the Philippines, just for no other reason that there was some instability with the licensing. And I think no matter what business you're in, when you have 90% of your service delivery from one location, it's a business risk. So many operators have been moving. I would say they never left Taiwan. There was always a underlying amount of players in Taiwan, but certainly Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia. I think most larger operators had been going there in stealth mode, or in some cases, very large numbers. So I don't want to say it's the least worst option, but the Philippines certainly provides, relative to some of the other regions, some greater advantages.
Understood.
But I think, like any business, you have to, there's pros and cons and advantages to. Probably the largest, I guess, growth area in the region is India, and I think, again, obviously it'd be very important to have a very tight relationship in India with the end customer, but that's not possible either. So yet when you're servicing India, you have to look at countries, and the Philippines is certainly servicing many Indian companies and I guess sectors right now. So I think if you're looking at India, which is certainly when you're talking about Western operators marching into Asia, if you include India in that group, then I think many are probably looking where to do service delivery for India.
Understood. I wish we had more time, gentlemen, but we need to wrap this up. You know, we could spend 2 full days talking about this. It's a topic I have at heart. But for anyone who's contemplating moving to Asia, feel free to get in touch with me anytime, or I'm sure one of my guests on this panel would be happy to answer any of your questions. Keith, Alan, Saxon, thanks again for being with us.